Hi, everybody. My name's Scott Wingerter. I'm your classmate. I'm your, resident conservative and class assist. And so this is my video presentation for week 10. It's been a great summer. I've enjoyed our discussions over the last 10 weeks, and I'm looking forward to maybe having some more classes with you in the future. All right, so I picked for my public policy, maybe not the, most exciting public policy. It's a little bit abstract. It may not be probably the most important in some people's eyes, but it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So I fully believe in strengthening civic education in Texas, particularly in higher ed, but then I would like to also see that sort of trickle down into your 7 through 12 social studies classrooms in Texas classrooms across the state, whether it's, definitely public school. You can't really mandate for private, but so that's my public policy. A lot of this is because this is my first class really, and that in 5301 into political science. And what is attracting me to this field is really I want to be able to teach government in college. In case you didn't know, I already am an adjunct professor of U.S. history, and then being able to also teach government is going to make me a little bit more marketable, and I really do enjoy it. The areas of history that I got into were intellectual history, legal history, and political philosophy. And so it's really that political philosophy that interests me a lot more than I'm finding political science does. And I think that's why I'm such a big proponent of this whole civic education thing, is because it focuses a little bit more on the philosophy that goes into all of this, as opposed to, all the quantitative and qualitative data and the polls and all that stuff. So I like the ideas that sort of go into government and how it's intended to work, and the philosophy behind that. So I'm a big proponent, as I'm sure you guys know, of classical education, and there's lots of these civics programs that are popping up, and I'll be able to get into that a little bit further on into my presentation here, but they're popping up all over the country right now, and a lot of them are focused specifically on using that sort of classical pedagogy and the things that you would find in a classical school or a traditional classical education. And so I think it's really important because civic education matters, because people don't know anything about our Constitution. They don't know about, the history behind the ideas that made our country such a great country, that the ideas of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and sort of that monumental task that was done in the 1770s, 80s, and then early 1790s as well, that really laid the foundation for, the liberal democracies across the world. And so I'm going to use democracy and republic pretty interchangeably here. I'm not using the classical definition of democracy, but rather one of the more moderns, like, democracy as opposed to totalitarianism, just so that we're got our academic language clear here. So this civic education stuff matters. Understanding these concepts is really important, because you cannot have a republic, you can't maintain a democracy without people understanding how it's supposed to work, and then keeping our governmental officials accountable to those principles. And I think most of us here, I think, are teachers, and we understand that concept, I think, very well. However, I think we'd all agree that most Americans don't really get it. Like, they might be able to pass the STAR test, for example, in 12th grade to get out of government class and graduate. But if you run into them like a year down the road, 2 years down the road, and you ask them a simple question about how the Constitution is supposed to work, they can't answer the question. So I think civics would address that way better than just sort of the U.S. government class in the way that we're teaching it today. So let's walk through what this new policy looks like, and we can address this issue sort of head on. So I plan on introducing a proposed centers for civic constitutionalism or constitutional literacy, or we can let the board of regents of the different universities come up with whatever naming that they configurations that they want for it. But the idea is we need to be funding a nonpartisan academic center at major Texas universities, and some of them already have started to institute this. UT Austin, as an example, does have a specific civic school that the Board of Regents for them have just thrown $100 million into. But I'd like to see that at other Texas universities as well, especially Sam Houston State University, our alma mater, and actually where I am going to be adjuncting for here this next semester. So I'm excited about that. So I would love to see this kind of education present at Sam, as an example, and other universities across the state of Texas. The center would focus on both research, curriculum development, teacher training, and how to get the public more engaged. And that's really what's awesome about this sort of program is it's sort of an interdisciplinary idea where you're going to have people who are education majors, people who are historians, people who are political science majors, all of them coming together and teaching these courses in a sort of more of like a humanities approach to it, a Western civilization approach, focusing on philosophy and things like that. And just, it's a totally radically different way than like the government course that you took when you were at in your undergrad. All right. Why do we need this? Well, it's pretty simple. I think no one's going to disagree with this. Americans don't know anything about our own government, which is a problem when you're trying to remain a republic, right? So there was a 2018 study, and I'll put all of the sources here at the, either in the notes, or well, not the notes. I'm used to making YouTube videos. Sorry. I'll put all of this stuff in the actual discussion when I post the video, so that all my sources are in there. But there was a 2018 study by the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship out of Princeton University that said like 39% of Americans, if you give them the test that citizens that immigrants have to take to become citizens, they can't pass that test. And that's some pretty basic knowledge about things, stuff that you and I would think is rather trivial. It's like, oh yeah, I know when the Bill of Rights was written. The Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776. The Second Amendment says that, people can have a right to keep and bear arms. Like basic stuff. They can't pass this test. So what I would like to do is I would like to emphasize the importance of preparing students to be responsible citizens. I think if they understood the value of this stuff a little bit more, understood sort of the history, and really sort of to think about how important these concepts are, and to have these sort of dialogues with them and conversationally. And maybe you do that in your classroom. And so this isn't an attack against you if you're doing this stuff in your classroom, having Socratic discussions with your students about how important this stuff is. And then great, that's exactly what I want. But you and I both know that, the freaking football coach that also teaches government because, he's a social studies teacher, is not doing this sort of stuff in their classrooms. So nothing against football coaches. I'm being honest here. All right. So I think it's super important that we have these sort of programs, not only just in college, but in high schools as well. And we've tried to take sort of steps towards this. For example, the 87th legislature had House Bill, I think it was 3979. But that bill doesn't go all the way as far as I want to do. What I'm really looking for is scholarly institutions like, universities really to lead the way here at first, and then have that sort of trickle down to over a period of a couple years into the high schools as well. So Some other institutions that I would sort of base this off of is if you've heard of Hillsdale College, they have a bunch of civics initiatives. They have their free online courses, which are highly recommended by me. I've gone through, I think, all of the history and politics that they have on there. My son goes to Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is a fantastic organization. I mentioned the University of Texas, Austin has the School of Civic Leadership. Arizona State University has the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, has the School of Civic Life and Leadership. There's another private college. I mentioned Hillsdale. That's a private college. University of Austin, which is this brand new school that's in downtown Austin, has a growing emphasis on liberal education, the liberal arts, and sort of that classical education. That's what they're heavily focused on, and civics is a huge part of their program that they're pioneering right now. And even 4 days ago, the University of South Carolina has come out and said that they too are going to be instituting a new civics program at their university as well. So this is a growing trend that we're seeing in academia across the country, and I would like to see Texas sort of step up what it is that we can do here based off of what others are doing, because I just think it's so important, and I think it's really the right step in the right direction there. So sort of these core components of the proposal is we're going to develop a curriculum-aligned ideas on how to institute these in these public universities. And eventually, I would like to see that once these universities set up these civic schools, I would love to see it so that teachers can then go and do sort of summer seminars and get these specific civic certifications out of these programs, and then bring that back. Maybe it's your department head, maybe it's the guy who leads if you have a team of 4 or 5 government teachers or economics teachers, or U.S. history teachers for 11th grade at high schools, send those guys to go get these certifications on how to teach this stuff the classical way, and explain to these students how important this stuff is, and implement a similar sort of almost pilot program in high schools. And then eventually, if you start seeing the fruit, if you start seeing the more of a participation in civic activity, like if 18 to 21 year olds all of a sudden start voting more, as an example, would be maybe a good quantitative metric to judge whether or not this is actually having the effect that I think it will. That would be I think a good measure. And then you start mandating that, okay, no, your 7 through 12 composite social studies teachers, as they come out of college, they need to attend, some of these programs as well in order to get that 7 through 12 social studies composite certification in order to teach public school. And I think that would have a dramatic impact, because as an experienced teacher, I've been teaching for 11 years. I've taught public school, I've taught private school, I've taught at the collegiate level. The biggest thing that I think is the most important thing that a teacher needs to have, and I'm sure all of you will agree with this, is you need to have that knowledge of content and that passion for content, because this is sort of a classical idea as well. Is like, my job as a teacher isn't to just take knowledge and ram it down your throat and like, there you go, now you know it, kid, get out of here. No, my job is to make you fall in love with the content. My job is to demonstrate to you the wonder of what it is that I'm teaching you about. And if I can get you to go, wow, that's cool, I never thought of it like that, now you got the bug. Like maybe something you never even cared about before, all of a sudden now it's a little bit interesting to you. And that's going to be that seed that's going to grow and make you one of those lifelong learners. And that's what classical education is really all about. So it's really this idea of taking those sort of elements and components in packaging it into the civics class, and making that a part of how we do history and social studies and government and economics and all of that stuff, in order to make sure that we are maintaining our traditional sort of viewpoints on a lot of this stuff that make up the principles of what, for lack of a better word, American government or Americanism, if you will. So I want Texas to host, have our public universities start hosting these civics outreach programs, provide scholarships and fellowships for students studying civics, government, and education. Offer maybe even having research labs, present in some of these organizations to offer civic education and American political thought, and incorporating elements of this classical mindset, I think, is absolutely essential. Emphasizing primary sources, civic virtue, teaching people how to do rhetoric and speak, and the just basic ideas of philosophy and philosophical inquiry that's like rooted in our Western sort of a tradition, coming from all the way from ancient Rome, ancient Greece, up through the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, and like all of those really awesome traditions that we can trace as Americans our heritage back through, and had a dramatic impact on the founding of the country, and of course, therefore, our history as well. So I just highly value a lot of that stuff. All right, so I think the benefit of this policy is it's going to improve civic literacy across a plethora of age groups, whether it's college kids, undergrads, even people like us in graduate school, down through high school and into middle school. Is this necessarily appropriate for maybe elementary school? Probably not, specifically getting into like the deep philosophical issues. But like I said, that's why I think that linking it to that 7 through 12 composite social studies certification, I think is where it naturally fits. And you sort of dial up the intensity as you get through those different levels. I think it strengthens teaching by supporting educators. We're going to be emphasizing how important this is, and then making a pathway for educators to be able to get a hold of this content and understand it and appreciate it better. And I think that is going to translate to a better communication of these ideas to our students across the board in the state of Texas. It promotes a balanced, sort of nonpartisan understanding of American constitutional principles. This should not just be, a Republican-led thing or a Democrat-led thing. This needs to be nonpartisan, and it needs to be rooted in truth, beauty, and goodness, which is another classical principle. And I think it's going to make Texas sort of a national leader in the civic education revival that I would love to see happen, and I think is actually happening. So I want Texas to be at the forefront of that. So a lot of people have some concerns about this. I think the number one concern is that it's could be used as politicization of civic education. Like I said a moment ago, it shouldn't be Republican, it shouldn't be Democrat, but a lot of people that would maybe think this is more of a conservative thing, they're not necessarily wrong about that. But it's conservative in that it's traditional. It's classical. It's what our heritage is. And that's exactly what conservative Republicans tend to want to preserve, right? But this isn't a conservative GOP sort of thing, if you will. I want to emphasize that while classical approach to education, I guess, is it's inherently conservative by nature, right? So we're valuing enduring texts, we're valuing civic virtue, intellectual rigor, but none of this necessitates that it has to be partisan or there doesn't need to be injected with political bias. I think you're going to run into that anytime you're dealing with a sort of political issue. I certainly have my opinions. I wouldn't be taking political science in college if I wasn't fascinated by politics. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. And we all have our different biases and everything like that. But when teaching, especially younger kids and then even undergrads, that can't really get in the way of just teaching them the principles. And it's the principles that I think really matter more than anything. because that's what we base our other subjective opinions on, is those principles. But those principles are the things that are sort of in concrete and standing and lasting. But they're old principles. I mean, the country's been around it'll be 250 years next year, right? So these are some lasting principles. Some of them go all the way back 2,500 years. Like the pursuit of happiness is an example. That's a 2,500 year idea that comes from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. These are very old ideas, and so by their very nature, they can be conservative, but that doesn't necessarily translate as conservative versus progressive or liberal. So when I'm using that as conservative, that's not what I intend at all. This has to be a nonpartisan effort in order to really achieve its purpose. I think some people might be a little bit hesitant. The taxpayers, like, aren't we already doing this? Well, I guess my response to that, would be, well, look at the dismal reports that are out there when you question people about, hey, can you define rights? Like, think about this. Do you know a single adult in your life, that can define rights? Like, not give me like an example, like, I don't know, freedom of speech or something like that. But what is the definition? Would they get that rights is literally the opposite of wrong, that rights is defined as that which is morally correct and just? I've met very, very, very few people that could give me that actual definition. That is the definition of rights. And so that's what I'm getting at is, yes, we might be spending a whole bunch of money on this, whether it's in public universities already teaching government or teaching government in high schools. But are the results what we want them to be? I would say no, they're not. And I think no one can really argue otherwise. And so this really could be translated as, this is sort of an attempt to fix our broken education system. So this is education reform, just as much as it is, something that's, warms the cockles of my heart because I have a particular passion about it. So this is a reform idea, and I think it's one that we should be embracing. Okay. How much is this going to cost? Well, building college buildings on campuses, that can be costly, or renovating existing buildings for different purposes, that of course can be expensive. You need to hire the right staff that sort of get this mentality and what it is that you're trying to achieve here. So the costs are going to be, obviously in the millions of dollars, depending on how many universities or colleges that you want to start off with here. And who's going to pay for all of that? Well, these are public universities that I'm arguing should be the ones doing this. So it's going to be the taxpayers. And so you got to convince these legislatures that this is a worthwhile idea and that it's worth spending the money. But as I just mentioned, I don't even think that's a hard sell. Like, as I noted above with the University of Texas, they just pledged $100 million towards this at their campus. So that's a lot of money, but also, I would say what we're doing isn't working, and sometimes this inevitably is going to cost money. I mean, we're all getting either our graduate certificates, as in my case, or maybe your master's degree, your full master's degree in political science, or the dual one with the history department as well, which was super cool. I wish I had that option when I got my history master's degree from Sam a couple of years ago. But what are we going to do with these degrees? Maybe some of you might go out and do other stuff other than teach, but I wanted to be a teacher. I want to teach college. That's why I'm doing this stuff. I have a vested interest in pursuing that. So I would be very interested in seeing more opportunities to teach this very sort of subject at a civics school, because that just means that not only am I going to be able to do what I'm passionate about and what I love, but also, I'll be able to earn a decent paycheck doing something that I think is worthwhile. So I see it as a win-win across the board. But it is going to cost money. And, other states are doing this, right? Um, Other states are spending a sizable amount of money pursuing this, but it doesn't necessarily have to always be just on the states as well, right? So we can raise money through charitable donations towards this goal as well. So there's a plethora of ways of getting the money. The money's out there, but you need the sort of initiative to get going here, and so I don't see that as being a huge, you know, block in the road, if you will. All right, so how are we going to get this done? Well, the first step is, I think you're going to have somebody be a legislative sponsor of drafting a bill for this, and you get this done in a regular session. Another one's going to be taking off in January of 2027. And so now is the time to talk to somebody I know people at Senator Creighton's office because I live here in Montgomery County. I know Senator Creighton, and he runs the whole education subcommittee in the Texas Senate. So he might be a good person to start with, or maybe one of his legislative assistants. You just talk to them about how important this is, and then you just need to figure out who your host universities might want to be. Like I'm recommending Sam. I think it'd be awesome, Sam, if we could do this, right? And then you establish I think it's very important that you have an advisory board as you're starting to roll this out, and making sure that it's a bipartisan advisory board. And you expand it over time if you can get the bill through the Senate, and then you can get the bill through the House. And if the governor signs it and we pledge money as a legislature, decides to fund it, which I don't see it being really that big of a hurdle here. I think everybody agrees that it's an easy case to make, that we're not doing necessarily a great job with civics education, and we need to put some attention towards that. So and then over time, like I said, you get it to a point where the colleges are out there and they're doing it, and then you have it trickle down into your sort of 7 through 12 social studies teachers. And eventually you, over maybe a period of 10 years, you say, all right, well, the state needs to have you go to one of these civics programs and take some courses through that in order to get your 7 through 12 social studies composite certification. All right, so I'm just about out of time here. So I really do think that we need a renewed focus on civics. Texas, I think, is a great place to do this. As I mentioned, other states across the country are doing it as well. You have both private schools and public schools that are doing it, but it's I think it's a diverse group of different places across the country. Arizona, North Carolina, South Carolina, Princeton is, I think, looking into it. As well. I know Harvard has looked into this as well. I don't know that they're currently creating programs, but there are people in Harvard at the different colleges, like education and the Kennedy School of Government, for example, like that are very interested in this sort of idea. So this is, you have a diverse group of states that are looking into it, and I think it's important that we emphasize this proposal. It's constructive. It's nonpartisan. It's a solution to a widely recognized problem that Americans' civic understanding of the country that they live in and their heritage is, not up to snuff. So, I would love to hear what you guys think about this idea. And if you disagree, I'd love to hear that as well. As always, we've disagreed over the last 10 weeks on a number of issues, but, we did it civilly, and I appreciate that very much. So let me know what you guys think, and I look forward to seeing your videos as well. Have a great rest of your summer, and I've enjoyed our time together. Thank you so much.